How are you ding-dong diddly doing there, neighborinos? Hope you're having a flanderific day. So a few things. One, it is my birthday, so you are legally required to watch and donate your life savings. Um, Two, can we just take a moment to literally thank God that Trump is president right now? He gave me the best birthday present I could have asked for. He told Netanyahu that, fuck no, we are not going to war with Iran. So, thank you, President Trump. Very cool. Also, very cool that our birthday is one day apart. And I mean, I guess several years, but still pretty cool. His is on the 14th and mine is on the 15th. Pretty cool. We had, well, I had to go to work because I was so distracted I forgot to ask for my birthday off, so I had to, like I said, go to work. But I came home, we had cowboy meatloaf, which was fucking incredible. It's so good. It's just like, it's meatloaf, but it's like in a roll. It's like rolled up, and there's like like jalapeno peppers and bell peppers in it, and cheddar cheese and mozzarella cheese and cream cheese. And then on the outside, it's a like ketchup and adobo pepper mix for like the glaze. So good. And I had a cherry custard for dessert, which was really good. Unfortunately, I'm not done oxidizing this copper. So, I mean, we're pretty close. I mean, look at that. Look at that. We're almost there. We're almost there. So that's what we're going to do this episode, is oxidize some copper. Fun stuff. And we're going to go ahead and listen to some videos. I've got... We'll see how many... or how long these first three take, and if not, I've got a fourth one, you know, if it's not long enough. Oh, wow. So we're going to start off with, "You're not supposed to exist if atheism is true" by Testify. No, you don't. No ad.
About something so obvious, we miss how weird it really is. You're conscious. You're not just reacting to stuff like a rock rolling downhill. You're aware. You experience the world. Think about your future. You worry about finals. You wonder whether this video will change your mind. You know that you're you. Here's the problem. According to atheistic naturalism, none of this was supposed to happen. On naturalism, everything starts from unconscious matter, just particles bouncing around in a godless void. That's the foundation. No mind, no meaning, no purpose, just atoms and physics. So here's the question. Why would that kind of universe randomly cough up you? Consciousness isn't just one more physical process to throw under a microscope. It's not like digestion or photosynthesis. It's first-person experience. And no matter how many neurons you map or circuits you model, you'll never get "I feel sad" or "I love my mom" out of electricity. There is a huge chasm between firing neurons and feeling anything at all. Even atheist philosophers admit this is a massive problem. Colin McGinn famously asked, "How did evolution convert the water of biological tissue into the wine of consciousness?" So let's be real, if naturalism is...
So first off, I just want to say, I've heard some atheists say that it's because early humans tripped out on magic mushrooms, and that is why we have consciousness. I don't understand how that makes any sense, but that is what they say. Thank you there. Who is that? Oh, Pickle! Hey! What's up, man? Thank you so much. Glad you stopped in and wished me a happy birthday. See, I knew if I put "you're legally required to watch the video" that you would watch the video. It has been a long time. It's nice to see you. I saw you were streaming a while back, but it must have been when I was asleep. Well, thank you. Yeah, yeah, but I think it was probably at like 3 o'clock my time, so I was big asleep. I'm finding it hard to stay up till like 2 now, so yeah, yeah. How have things been with you? And while I'm waiting to hear from you, I'm gonna go ahead and finish up my point here. What time is it for you right now? It is 9:26. Been doing good, just living and stuff. I mean, that's better than dying and stuff. Yeah, I feel like probably a lot has changed. 3 hours ahead? Yeah. Oh, I thought it was more. I thought it was more. Weird. Because you've got. Yeah, because I thought you're from California. So I feel like that's 4 times you are. Yeah, I feel like that's 4 time zones ahead. Weird. Because you've got like the central. Oh, oh okay. Huh. Weird. Very weird. Because I thought. Well, no, wait. No. It is. It's central, Rocky Mountain. Yeah, it is 3. I don't know why I thought it was 4. Yeah, okay, whatever. Maybe there was a new. Yeah. I forgot. New update dropped. Um, yeah. I mean, I'm still waiting for that Jesus 2.0 update. Oh, that's gonna be sick. That's gonna be sick. The 2025 update. Yeah, Trump came in and he just changed a lot of shit around. He was like, you know what? There's too many time zones. We're gonna get rid of one of them. I was talking to Elon, and Elon said, we're cutting this time zone. Gotta watch for the live Jesus 2.0 event. We can't stop winning. You may even get tired of winning. Hilarious. Fucking hilarious. I mean, there is a lot of winning going on. I'm not gonna lie. Telling Israel that we're not going to fight Iran with them, that is winning. That is what winning looks like. Um, but yeah. Not going to die in some. Sorry, no offense, people from Iran. Some shithole in the Middle East. Yeah, that sounds like winning to me. Sounds like winning to me. Oh, I hope Yellow is okay. I think Yellow is going to Iraq. And that's like, I know you're going to be shocked to hear this, but Iraq is right next to Iran. So hopefully he's okay. Not catching any stray missiles or drones. Yeah, I know, right? Craziness. Who would have ever guessed? Then again, I feel like, um, this might be a shock, but it's true. Did you know Georgia is right next to Russia? Mm-hmm. It's true. Anyway, I can't really stay. Just wanted to say hi for your birthday stream. I'll maybe pop in. Gotcha. This is, well, I'm gonna be doing another stream later, so yeah. Well, thank you for stopping on in and saying hi and wishing me a happy birthday, Pickle. I appreciate it. I am being serious though. Georgia is right next to Russia. That actually is factual. All right. See ya, man. um, but yeah, everyone. So, well, I mean, I guess Pickle is the only one here, but for the YouTube people, um, yeah. So I hear a lot of atheists say that um, our ancestors ate magic mushrooms, and that is how we gained consciousness. But that just doesn't make any sense for a couple of reasons. One, um, think of people who take a lot of magic mushrooms right now. Here's one for you: Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson does not seem like the next step in evolution. Sorry, Mike Tyson seems like a cool guy. You know, I think he's a great boxer. It's pretty incredible that he can sit there and eat handfuls of magic mushrooms and like continue on with an interview. But he is not the next step in human evolution. I know it's ludicrous, but yeah. And second off, so your answer here is that no other, so humans just happen to eat these magic mushrooms that gave us consciousness, but nothing else ate those magic mushrooms and gained consciousness? Okay. That weird story, bro. Like that doesn't add up. Like I don't understand how we would be like the only ones that would have ever eaten that to gain consciousness. Like, okay. And also, why, if it's just like evolution, right, which is what um Testify here is saying, if it's just evolution, and I think he's probably already kind of said this, but like, or it might be going in to say it, but why do we not have like dogs that are conscious and can talk like humans? Why are we the only ones? Christianity explains that pretty well. It's because we're made in God's image. Pretty simple. That's why we have the ability to think and reason, and we're complex beings. Is because we're made in God's image, and God wanted uh, companionship and someone to like, you know, appreciate how awesome He is. So that just makes sense. Whereas saying that only humans evolved to gain this level of consciousness is just kind of cope. That's the best way I can describe it, is just cope. Anyway, moving on. Wow, it is starting to really storm outside. I was very disappointed. I wanted to go home and get in a quick swim. I didn't get to swim today. I've been feeling fat, so I want to swim, you know, because it's great cardio. Anyway, that's neither here nor there.
True. If all that exists fundamentally is non-conscious matter governed by blind physical laws, then consciousness is not something that you would expect. You might expect complex behavior, information processing, maybe even robots that pass Turing tests. But subjective experience, the inner what it's like to be you, has no place in that picture. It doesn't follow from mass, charge, or spin. Nature can simulate intelligence without consciousness, so the emergence of minds with first-person awareness looks, from the standpoint of naturalism at least, deeply anomalous. But if the foundation of reality is a personal mind, then the appearance of finite minds is not only unsurprising, it's what we would expect. This is what philosophers call an inference to the best explanation. We're not just asking how consciousness works, we're asking, given that it exists, which worldview does a better job making sense of it? On theism, consciousness fits naturally. On atheistic naturalism, it's a mystery bordering on a miracle. Now, some people will push back and say, you're just invoking God because you don't understand consciousness. That's just God of the gaps. But that misses the point completely. This isn't about what we don't know, it's about what we do know. Consciousness is real. It's not a blank in our knowledge. It is a full-blown data point. And the question is, which worldview actually predicts the data? Appealing to God here isn't filling a gap. It's just recognizing that theism gives us a world where minds make sense, where they're actually expected. Naturalism, on the other hand, gives us physics, particles, equations, and somehow that's supposed to spit out subjective experience? That's not a pathway, that's a leap. And while critics throw around God of the gaps, they quietly lean on their own version. Naturalism of the gaps. They have no mechanism, no model, just blind faith that science will one day stumble into a solution. Now, let's map out some of the main options. First, there's reductive materialism that says consciousness just is brain activity. Neurons fire and poof, experience. But that's just correlation masquerading as explanation. Why should electricity be conscious of anything? Why isn't your brain just a cold, unconscious calculator? Strong emergence says consciousness pops out when matter gets complex enough.
I also just want to point out that, like, we have AI and robots and shit, but we have not been able to have them, like, have, like, their own subjective consciousness. So, science has done a pretty shit job with consciousness. You'd think that if it was so cut and dry, so scientific, so easy, to understand scientifically, we would be able to have robots and AI have subjective consciousness, but they don't.
But that just labels the problem without solving it. Why does complexity create awareness at all? And if it adds something new, like mental properties with causal power, then you've left physicalism behind. Panpsychism says all matter has some degree of consciousness. That avoids the something from nothing problem, but under atheism, why would a mindless universe be made of proto-minds? That kind of reality fits way better under theism, where consciousness is there from the start. So when you're comparing worldviews, the one that makes the data more probable is the better explanation. And when it comes to consciousness, theism just isn't a placeholder. It's the best match. Studying the conversion of the Apostle Paul turned an
let me just say, this one here is, was the Apostle Paul a fraud by Testify?
And skeptical English statesman into a Christian apologist. 1747, George Littleton penned Observations on the Conversion and Apostleship of St. Paul. Littleton wrote, I thought the conversion and apostleship of Paul alone, duly considered, was of itself a demonstration sufficient to prove Christianity to be a divine revelation. In this very short and influential work of 18th century Christian apologetics, Littleton examines the life of Paul found in Acts and in his letters, and offers the following quadrilemma. Number one, either Paul was an impostor who said what he knew to be false with an intent to deceive, or number two, he was an enthusiast who had posed on himself by the force of an overheated imagination, or number three, he was deceived by the fraud of others, or number four, what he declared to be the cause of his conversion did all really happen, and therefore the Christian religion is a divine revelation. The statements made by Paul in his letters, which he addressed to different churches and individuals, cannot, quote, be doubted without overturning all rules by which the authority and genuineness of any writings can be proved or confirmed, end quote, according to Littleton. Let's take a look at option one. Was Paul deliberately spreading something that he knew to be false? This definitely isn't a very popular theory today, but Littleton doesn't duck this possibility, and in some corners of the internet, you still see this from time to time. The context of the claims makes it very improbable that Paul was lying. For starters, Paul knew that Jesus was crucified, and with approval of the high priest, Paul was breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. Changing teams would be a suicide mission. What possible earthly motivation could he have? Paul certainly was not
Literally, though, it literally was a suicide mission. I mean, we haven't even gotten into, like, the book of Acts, and we really haven't looked at all that many New Testament books in this series here. We've just gone through Matthew and, like, parts of Romans, and I mean, we've kind of touched on some other parts of, like, the New Testament and a little bit of the Old, But yeah, again, why would you go ahead and say, you know what, this isn't true, but I'm gonna go ahead and be part of it, even though they're all being murdered horribly. I want to be murdered horribly, said no one ever. Like, again, there were Christians that were like uh, thrown in the Colosseum to like be attacked by lions and shit. There was, again, the one apostle who was like ripped apart by horses. There was another one that was like dragged through the city, like again with a horse. He was like tied up on the back or behind a horse and was like the horse like started running through the city or whatever. There was one who was boiled alive, and I think that one was John, and I think he survived that. He also survived being stoned. Stephen was stoned. Uh, Andrew was crucified. I think Peter was crucified. It's like, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. I want to go. I know this is fake, but I want to go ahead and join those guys. Yeah, that makes no sense. And he, better than any other apostle, would have known about the persecution of Christians because he was literally like, again, like a part of that. He was like helping to stone Stephen. He knew what being Christian got him, but he was like, you know what, I'm going to convert anyway. So yeah, saying that it was like just for the lulz is stupid. And also trying to say that, oh, you know, he was like rich and famous because of it. That's also really stupid. But I'm not going to touch on that too heavily because I think he's going to bring it up later in the video.
Reaching for wealth, unlike many modern televangelists today, being an apostle was not the way to fame and
Well, shit, there you go.
fortune. In his letter to the Corinthians, he wrote, "To this very hour we go hungry and thirsty, we are in rags, we are brutally treated, we are homeless." Paul worked with his own hands to support his missionary journeys. He wrote to the Thessalonians, "Surely you remember, brothers, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preached the gospel of God to you." So, did Paul become a Christian to gain a reputation? That doesn't seem very likely. Paul was a star pupil of Gamaliel, a member of the Sanhedrin. He embraced a religion that was universally despised by both Jew and Gentile. In his letter to all apostles.
Yeah, no, he makes a great point there. If Paul wanted to be famous, he would have just continued being part of the Sanhedrin, because he would have not been famous among the Romans, who also did not, because he was part Roman, and the Romans also did not like Christians. They were not fans, because, well, I mean, I guess Jews also admitted that Caesar was not God, but like, again, they were really not a fan of Christians. Again, like I said, they threw them in the Colosseum and had them get ripped apart by lions. Doesn't sound like a very, very nice thing to do. Sounds like something you would do to someone you really didn't like. So yeah, he could have been famous among the Romans and the Jews for being the dude who fought Christians, but instead he decided to be hated by both of them to go and be a Christian. So
when the Corinthians were arguing over which apostle was the most important, Paul rebuked them for their carnality. Paul obviously sought no earthly power. He admonished believers to live in submission to the government and to pay their taxes. So what about serving his own selfish lusts? Well, it's hard to accuse...
Boo, paying taxes. Sorry, the libertarian in me came out.
Paul of serving his passions. He lived a celibate life. He appealed to his own conduct as an example of what a holy life looks like. Religious cult founders like Joseph Smith and Muhammad sought earthly power and married multiple wives. Paul was the exact opposite of such leaders. What?
Yeah, in the case of Muhammad, like a 9-year-old girl.
What about the idea that Paul conspired with some of the disciples? Well, contrary to some common skeptical tropes, Paul didn't invent Christianity, rather he inherited it. He had no connection to any Christians outside of persecuting them. If Paul preached something that they didn't, it would ruin his credit. To fake a conversion to Christianity, he'd first have to find out what Christianity taught. It's difficult to incline someone to share their secrets of deception with you by arresting them and killing them. Remember also that at one time Paul rebuked Peter. Accomplices in fraud generally don't go around publicly castigating fellow leaders. Also, if Paul was acting on his own, he was fighting quite the uphill battle. He was preaching to the Gentiles that a crucified Jew was the Lord and judge of all mankind. He was not asking them to add one more deity to their pantheon, and preaching that a criminal who hung on a cross was hardly appealing to most Jews living in the diaspora. Littleton aptly asked if St. Paul had nothing to trust but his own natural faculties, his own understanding, knowledge, and eloquence, could he have hoped to be singly a match for all theirs united against him? Could a teacher unheard of before, from an obscure and unlearned part of the world, have withstood the authority of Plato, Aristotle, Epicurus, and Zeno? If you think about it, it's difficult to imagine a fraud overcoming these odds without the aid of miracles, which Paul claimed to have performed. If Paul was a fraud, he must have been quite the magician. But what did he gain from this fraud? Paul lets us know. 5 times I received 40 lashes minus 1 from the Jews. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I received a stoning. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and day in the open sea. On frequent journeys, I faced dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own people, dangers from Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, and dangers among false brothers, toil and hardship, many sleepless nights, hunger and thirst, often without food, cold, and without clothing. It is pretty much next to impossible to argue that Paul was a fraud. That's going to do it for this particular video. We've looked at the fraud option. In the next video, we're going to consider the 2 options of whether or not Paul was mistaken and see if those carry more weight. Thank you for watching.
Okay, this one is Paul's teaching at odds with Jesus' teaching by Testify.
Critics, Paul hijacked Christianity. He preached an entirely different gospel than Jesus. We're asked why Paul's teachings and tone are so different than what we read from Jesus in the 4 gospels. And plus, there are times that it seems that Paul and Jesus are at odds with each other. Critics will often say that modern Christians aren't really Christians, but they're Paulinites. Now, one natural response would be to say that Paul had a lot more to say about the meaning of the death and resurrection of Jesus, and Jesus wasn't just going to come out and say exactly what his death would accomplish. He was rather cryptic about it. But another response would be, is their teaching really all that different? Because there are literally dozens of times where Paul and Jesus are on the same page. Let's just look at a few. God can be referred to as Abba Father. We're to give God what belongs to God. We're to bless those who curse us and love our enemies. We're to live peaceably with all men. Love fulfills God's law. We're to remain alert until Christ's coming. We're not to judge others. All foods are clean. Salvation is open to the Gentiles. We're to be wise as serpents regarding what's good and as innocent as doves regarding evil. The kingdom of God is offered to those of low status. Ungodly men seek a sign. The gospel will offend many people. We're called to be trustworthy stewards who will one day be judged by Jesus. We're to expect mistreatment and persecution in kingdom work. Remaining single is a gift from God. Divorcing a woman to marry another woman is adultery. People must take care to not cause other people to stumble. Those that preach the gospel should be financially supported. We're to practice the Lord's Supper or communion. Faith can move mountains. Our earthly temple is made with hands, but we shall inherit a temple not made with hands. If we give, it shall be given back to us. Kingdom work is accompanied by signs and wonders. Knowledge of Jesus' identity comes from divine revelation. Rejecting God's messenger is the same thing as rejecting God himself. Jesus is one day going to return, and the day of the Lord is going to come unexpectedly. We must return evil with good. We're not supposed to worry. Jesus shed his blood for us. The law is established. Mankind is inherently sinful. sinful, and the kingdom of God is to be the believer's central focus. Whew, now that's a long list. Much of it comes from a great book by Paul Rhodes Eddy and Greg Boyd called The Jesus Legend. Highly recommend you get it. I will put a link in the description down below. So did Paul really preach a message so different than Jesus? I think we've seen that's not really the case. There's also the fact that Paul spent 15 days with Peter. This happened 3 years after his conversion. As skeptical New Testament scholar Bart Ehrman says, it defies belief that Paul would have spent 2 weeks with Jesus' closest companion and not learned something about him. What Paul would have learned would include what Jesus taught. Paul relied much on oral tradition that preceded him, and on many occasions Paul speaks of passing on teachings that he picked up from others.
I also just want to point out that he got the thumbs up from the apostles. Like, they were like, yep, this guy knows his stuff. He knows what he's talking about. It's true. You'd think that if he was just going around preaching some, like, random bullshit, that one of the other apostles would have been like, hey, this guy, he ain't it. He don't know what he's talking about. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And we know that Paul was not the only one going around and, like, starting churches and shit. Like, that Peter was pretty big into doing that. John was definitely into doing that. Like, you'd think one of them would have written something down. Like, oh, you shouldn't listen to this Paul guy. He's a grifter or a crazy person. But no, none of that. None of that. As a matter of fact, they give him the thumbs up, so just doesn't make any sense.
Going back to Paul's letter to the Galatians, we read that 14 years later, he returns to meet John, Peter, and Jesus' own brother James. He submits his gospel to them out of concern that maybe he was teaching the wrong message. But rather than being rejected by these men who personally knew Jesus, they actually endorsed his message and his mission to the Gentiles. The only thing they asked him to do is that he would remember the poor, which Paul says he was very eager to do, and it's very interesting to note that the apostles actually trusted Paul to collect offerings for the poor saints affected by the famine that was happening in Jerusalem. Also, the Corinthian church is familiar with Peter and Jesus' brothers, so they could have cross-checked Paul's message with them. While Paul's main interest was teaching on the meaning of Jesus' death and resurrection, he very clearly echoes and alludes to many traditions attributed to Jesus in the Synoptic Gospels, sometimes directly so. He says, "Not I, but the Lord." Moreover, the Jesus of the Gospels often spoke of his imminent and voluntary death, and Paul insists that if a person could be made right with God by keeping the 10 Commandments and God's law, there would be no reason for Christ to die. If Jesus really thought that a person could have eternal life simply by following Moses, then why think it necessary to undergo a seemingly suicidal mission? People could simply be Torah-observant Jews, and that would have been enough. But Jesus, as presented in the Gospels, apparently didn't think that was enough. To create a wedge between Jesus and Paul is just based on a really poor reading of the Gospels and the Apostles' letters.
Yeah, that's very true. I hadn't really thought of it that way. But yeah. Well, if Paul is wrong, what would be the point of Jesus showing up? Like, at all. It's not like he didn't know what was gonna happen. So, yeah, I think we're gonna cut it here for today, and I am going to yawn. And then I am going to hit up some Batman. Unfortunately, this isn't done oxidizing, but we're closer. We're a lot closer. We've only got this small little strip right here. Right here on the refrigerator. It's like one of the only Family Guy jokes that I think is funny. It's like Ringo writes Octopus's Garden, and he's like, "Hey guys, I wrote a song," and they're all like, "Oh, that's nice, Ringo. We're gonna put it right here, right on the refrigerator." Yeah. It's great. So yeah, thank you for watching Pickle. Thank you to anyone else who may have tuned in and didn't chat with me. Thank you to the YouTube crowd who's going to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.